Trent Cotney and John Kenney are dedicated to helping the construction industry with legal business and safety challenges. Welcome to this week's episode of Law and Mortar.
Hey, this is Trent Cotney. I'd like to welcome everybody to another episode of Law and Mortar. This is episode 106. And as always, I got John Kenney here with me. John, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's always great to be here. This is one of my favorite things we do.
Yeah, it's good seeing you, brother. So,
Too.
you and I always spend a little bit of time talking in advance, catching up, and you are hearing the same thing I'm hearing, and that is, we both travel the U.S. from coast to coast, and I think contractors out there, the backlog is shrinking. There's some uncertainty. I know here in the state of Florida, the lack of storms isn't helping anybody. Not that I ever wish another hurricane, but it's part of the industry. So one of the things I think is top of mind for all the contractors out there is, what should I be doing? What should I be thinking about? I always advocate for, making sure that you're staying on top of your AR, that you're, making sure you're securing your lien rights or your payment bond claims, those kind of things. But operationally, what would you tell a contractor that might be listening to this going, you know what, I think they're right. I'm having some problems. I'm a little worried. What should I be doing?
Yeah, I'm with you. I hear the same thing. I've been listening to, I would say 6 months ago, I heard things were looking not too bad. We've just kind of got in that point. I would say probably 80% of the contractors I talk to around the country feel confident finishing up this year, good backlog till the end of the year, maybe some carrying it over into January. But all I'm doing is budget numbers. All I'm doing is putting bids out. All I'm doing is, can you help me out for planning for next year? The landing of the contract's lower. So, this is a great question because we talked about this in a lot of the trainings that I've been doing. Number one, you got to get your foundation in your company right. You got to make sure you're pricing right. You got to make sure you've got a good system in place to pass information from your sales and estimating team over to operations so that you don't lose money on any job you do have. That's a number one. So you want to squeeze as much juice out of every orange you got coming in. The other one, and I know I'm not going at it from a legal term, that's what you're here for, but definitely review your contracts. I'm hearing more and more stuff being piled on a scope of work, sections that aren't, were never figured. It seems to be people are using AI to create some of these contracts now, like the scopes of work. Because I've had some people say to me, look, take a look at what they're expecting on the scope of work and doing and the fastening patterns, all those things. Be careful because as you have said 1,000 times, Trent, once you put the ink on that contract, you own whatever you signed. So again, on that, your AR, you're right. That's cash flow. What I've been talking to people about is how much do you have in your advanced bank account, right? How much is there if work stopped on January 1st, how much of your bills could be paid into going into 2026? That's important. You got to keep your money in, but you better have a cushion. Not like we hear on TV all the time, the financial home advisors say you got to have 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, save all your money, pull 25 out. No, what I'm talking about is what have you set aside in the last couple of years that have been really good since the pandemic, making money. You got to be able to carry yourself in business at least 6 months to a year. You really do with expenses. Trim them down. Don't waste it. One last tip that I'm going to throw in there. Go through all these darn subscriptions you signed up for software and trying things out. I was talking to somebody the other day. They found $10,000 worth of subscription they didn't even know they had. Sounds crazy, but look at those things.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both, business and risk mitigation when you're talking about this. And clearly, when the faucet's wide open and money's coming in the door, you don't see the cracks. You only see the cracks once that money starts to dry up. And you can never, as a business, if that money dries up, you can never cut fast enough to keep yourself afloat. So the key thing is start looking, put a pencil to things now, figure out how can you be more streamlined? What can you do to potentially get rid of unwanted expenses? Audit your credit card statements, audit your checking account, look at where those expenses are going, be thinking about it. And, hopefully it's worst case scenario. You don't have to worry
Yep.
about it, but it's just good business practice. On the legal side, yeah, absolutely. Review your contracts, make sure you have the capability to, defend against claims, watch out for, scope creep and change orders and things of that nature. without getting the proper approvals. And then, you need to be aggressive. You need to be aggressive with collections, regardless of whether it's residential or commercial. Everybody's your friend until it's time to come to pay you. And then all of a sudden it'll be next week. Right. Well, you can't be nice to everybody. You've got to make sure that you're turning the screws where you can, because, all it takes is a few bad projects and all of a sudden you can't keep the lights on. So, be mindful as we move into, and I'm hearing the same thing. I think there's plenty of work between now and end of the year, but looking, 4 to 6 months out, don't know, right? Don't know. And a lot of trepidation out there, a lot of people that are worried. Definitely this is the time to start working on your business, start working on the best practices. What can you do to make sure you're getting as much money out of the projects that you're doing, and you're cut the waste wherever you can. So, John, the other thing that it's still the most dominant question I'm getting is immigration related issues. Just spoke on this topic yesterday here locally. I'm going to be speaking on it here as I head off to NRCA meetings here next week. And, there's a lot of different nuances here, but one of the things that we're hearing, people that are here legally, whether it's through work authorizations or they're actual citizens, are being targeted and rounded up, unintentionally. They're getting detained. And, worst case scenario, I've had some reports of, a crew member being deported, even though that person shouldn't have been. And the question often comes up, what can I as an employer do in that situation? What rights do those employees have? And I think there's a lot of potential legal nuance there. But first, I just kind of wanted to hear from you, John, and see, have you heard anything about this? Or, I've heard it all over the U.S. It's not just this. And I don't want to give our listeners the wrong impression. This isn't, it's not, it's a very small percentage of what is going on out there, but it can happen, right? It can happen. And I think being prepared for it is important. But John, what are you hearing in that regard?
Yeah, what I'm hearing in that regard is it's happened. It's happened. It's probably still going to happen. And I'm hearing it's more, and I've heard it in all different cities, and it doesn't necessarily be anything you're just particularly watching on the news. I'm hearing it in places where you probably wouldn't even have heard of, except that there's a construction project going on. And what I've heard it's been is they've come into the job sites doing a job site full rate. So they weren't there targeting just one contractor. And pretty much everybody got swooped up and detained, even if it was only for hours or half a day. I've heard some of that. I've heard some of it being overnight, where they've been removed from the job site, and they just what they were told is we don't know who's legal, who's not, so we're going to go sort it out. But again, it's playing havoc on contractors, because if that happens on your job, if I have all legal people on my job and they do get swooped up and it happens only to me, it affects me greatly, right? I have a job that's wide open. I got to get it tied. What am I going to do? And now I can't do anything tomorrow and maybe the next 2 days. And then hopefully, and I've heard this, I heard a couple of people tell me up in the probably Midwestern, northern end, say that it happened to them, and the people said, look, I'm going to go find something else to do. I'm not going through this again. So that's worst case scenario. But you just got to be as prepared as you possibly can. And what have you been recommending? What's the steps, Trent?
Yeah, I think making sure that your employees know what their rights are is important. And you can't signal somebody out, right? You can't say, hey, I think you might need these employee rights cards, but you can make them generally available to all your employees, so that in the event that they end up running into ICE or they end up being wrongfully detained, they've got some guidance. And typically those employee rights cards are in both English and Spanish. They talk about that you don't have to talk to ICE, that you are entitled to counsel, things of that nature. If you are wrongfully detained or, God forbid, wrongfully deported, you could potentially have a civil rights claim there. There could be, an attorney that may look at that, but I would recognize it's a high threshold, right? There has to be some intentional misconduct, typically difficult to get those, but not impossible, right? And it depends on the nature of the facts and how egregious it is. The best thing that employees can do is make sure that they've got their valid work authorizations with them at all times. Okay, regardless of whether it's a temporary work authorization or it's a driver's license or it's citizenship, status, whatever it is, you want to make sure that you have that documentation with you, so that in the event that you are rounded up, you can at least present that documentation and you're in a much better position.
Solid advice.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Look, it's a tough issue. This is I've had a lot of very, difficult discussions with people on both sides of the table about immigration and how it impacts and affects, construction. And I understand the desire and the want for legal citizens and legalized workers to be here. And I think we as in the construction industry all want that. But I also think, and we've talked about this before, you got to start creating a mechanism that it's a little easier than what we've got now. Our immigration system is about as complex as our tax system, and I
Yep.
can't, I have a tough time understanding taxes. So I think that streamlining that is obviously something I'm going to advocate for, and I know you do as well. But I think pretty soon the pain point there is going to get so difficult, so tough that congressmen and women are going to have to start listening, and there's going to have to be
I
change.
agree.
Unfortunately,
Agree.
the only way you get there is when there's enough pain. So we're not there yet, but I think we will be maybe this time next year. John, I want to turn to your favorite time.
The question of the week.
Question of the week podcast. Okay. This is a good one because actually, it sounds like a basic question, but it's really not. This one's from Kate. Kate says that she has a new business. She's only been in business for 6 months, and she is looking towards the end of the year and wants to know, how should I prepare a budget? Seems like a basic question, but that's a good one. If you're in construction and you don't know, you've never run a business before, how do you prepare a budget? What would you say, John?
Well, if you've working currently and you have an existing business and you've kind of had what most business owners in the beginning have, where we set a sales goal and we kind of just make it happen, take your data. Take your data from your financial. What are you spent? What's your overhead? What are your expenses in each column? Where were your sales? How much profit did you make? Are you satisfied with it? Once you get that figured out, the rest of it's kind of easy. It's not really that much magic. The magic is I should say the non-magic is when we say, well, I did 1.5 million last year, so I'll set my budget for 5 million next year. That's a little bit pie in the sky, unrealistic. 5-10%, maybe not quite enough, because with inflation and all the cost of materials going up, you're probably not going to actually gain. But you start getting above 10, 15, 20% maximum, that's really pushing it and you're leaving yourself open. So get your costs in line, because you have to track them monthly as you go. Figure out if what money you made is enough, because if it's not, that means what? You've either got to cut expenses or you got to raise your prices. One of two things. And once that's done, your budget's set, and then it really comes to tracking. Most people go off track because they wait till the end of the year to get everything done with their accountant to see where they were. You have to watch it with your job costs and track your expenses on a monthly basis.
Yeah, that's good advice. And easy thing to do is even if you're using QuickBooks or something like that, pull off your current P&L and your balance sheet, get an idea of where you are. And it's good if you get some historic data, because you can figure out where you are year over year. The longer you're in business, the more accurate your budget should be. And don't it's not pie in the sky. It's trying to be realistic. And it's a good thought process, right? It helps you identify where your costs are, where you think you're gonna potentially have costs down the road, right? You might need a new website or upgrade technology or equipment. You need to factor all that in advance and then make sure you understand, this is how much I got to do each month in order to meet these goals, right? So I think it's not something that you should knock out in an hour, right? It should be, it should take some time where you're actually looking at it, figuring out, what can I do? How does this look? It's about planning, really. That's the point of a budget. So, I think it's always a good idea to do that. Well, John, that leads us to the end of this episode. I'd like to thank everybody for always tuning in to us. We really appreciate you. If you see us on the road, please come up, tell us what you like or dislike about it, and ask us any questions that you've got. We're happy to always answer them. Any questions for me, you can reach me at trent.cotney@arlaw.com or anywhere social at Trent Cotney. John, how can they get you?
Same way, you can get me at my email as well at jkenney@cotneyconsulting.com, or any social networks at @jkenney. So always happy to have people reach out. To some of the funnest parts, gets questions and answers that we do here. And I just want to thank everybody again for joining us.
Thank you, guys.